I'm Ross Kilsby. I'm the father of Graham, who now owns the property. I was married at 22. My wife, Beverly, she was a school teacher, and we built a new home, and where it is, where Graham is at the moment, we started farming here. I'm 81, so I've been here ever since I left high school at 16. We've only had one drought, I think. It was so dry that all the ground around here was just bare. We had to buy pellets and hay, and I sold stock. I think there was sheep with a fair pelt of wool on, and I only got $1 for those. And I sent cattle to the market. I think I sent 5 heifers to the market. They were about 12 months old, and I got $50. And I said, "Oh gee, that's not a bad price each." He said, "No, that was for the 5. So I've virtually got nothing for them. I've been in Mount Gambier. We live up at behind McDonald Park School. We've been in there for, I think it's 13 years. Graham took over the property when I shifted to town.
I'm Graham Kilsby, owner of Kilsbys Sinkhole, farmer of the land around it. I actually left school quite young. I left school at 15 and came home to work on the farm. It was quite interesting. The reason for that was my father actually won a trip around the world.
Back in 1983, I bought some drench, and there was a couple of coupons in the drench packs. And my wife said to me, she said, "Oh, why don't you get up and go and do your work?" And I said, "Oh, I don't know. I'm going to have a go at this." Anyway, I sent the 2 in just in time on the last day, and some weeks later I got this phone call to say, "Did you put 2 of the coupons from the ICI drench pack?" And I said, "Yeah." And he said, "You had 2 entries, didn't you?" I said, "Yeah, we found those." And he said, "You've won it." So that was great. I got a trip around the world in 1983.
They actually couldn't find anybody to manage the farm or look after the farm for the 3 months while they were away. So I actually left school at 15 years of age and came home and started farming with my father and mother. I suppose everything's came from that. Most of my life has been spent here on the property. I've sort of been running the family farm on my own for probably about the last 14 to 15 years. Dad retired and moved into town, and I actually then moved back into the family home here on the property. I'm actually the 4th generation, so my 2 sons, Robert and Adam. Robert's coming home to farm. He's just finishing an apprenticeship off, but he's coming home to farm either later this year or early next year when he finishes his apprenticeship. So yeah, Robert and Adam are 5th generation of the Kilsbys to farm. My great-grandfather was the start of the farm here, so he purchased it. Would have been back in the late 1800s, I think.
My great-grandfather came out from England in 1850 to Port Adelaide, and he had a son called James, or James was the father, and his son was Alfred, and he took up a property out at Glenburnie, a sheep property. Alfred died, and my father inherited ground here. He had 400 acres here, and then eventually he bought part of Barnoolet Station alongside us that contained the sinkhole, and he also bought property across the road that gave my brothers and I some extra land to farm. We had a farm at Moorack, a dairy farm there. That was where I was first born. Then when Dad retired, he went into town next to the tennis courts, and he ended up leaving the farm, and I took this part over and my brothers took the other. My grandfather, which I still remember really quite well, driving around in
his old Holden, moving mobs of sheep and eating his sandwiches and drinking his coffee. So then, yeah, my father that I farmed with, for a lot of years, and then myself, and now, the next generation, my sons. So there's been a lot of Kilsbys here over the almost 130 years we've been farming this land for, so quite a long time. As we got older, we'd jump from the ledges, around the sinkhole and wetsuits and goggles, and we'd snorkel it as well. We spent a lot of time here playing and exploring the sinkhole. At some stage it was actually a roadway, so there was a roadway that actually came through this area. The sinkhole was right on the edge of the roadway. So the roadway was actually closed in the 60s or 70s, and Dad had the opportunity to actually buy that roadway out and purchase the roadway and the sinkhole in that purchase. So it was a great thing that we were able to do that. Yeah, good on you, Dad. He didn't realise at the time, but...
Well, I think we didn't really appreciate how special it was until, the divers started coming in and they took photos and things, and for something that we couldn't see, we eventually were able to look at it and really appreciate what was down there. I have been down. They dragged me down they put me in a wetsuit and aqualungs, and the first time I did it, I was just going across the surface. I couldn't get down, so next minute 2 divers came and grabbed me by each arm and dragged me down. And I only went down about probably 30 or 40 feet, and my eardrum started to build up, and I said, let's go up. But it was an experience, yeah. I don't think I'd like to do it.
It was something that was always here and we took for granted very much. And we probably didn't realise what it was, but by bringing other people here and they're saying this is really amazing, this is something quite unusual, we started to realise we do have something quite special here. I love the beauty of it. It always changes, so it doesn't matter when, different times of the day, or every time I come to the sinkhole or view it from the platform. It's just a very calming, beautiful place to visit. It's always changing. My first dive here was about 8 years ago, I think. My brother and I were the first, although my sister actually did dive it previous to us, and she reminds me quite often about that. So my brother and I dived it roughly about 7 years ago for the first time.
Well, it's one Easter time, we had 2 divers from Adelaide, young fellows, and they hadn't had a lot of experience. They'd dived about 10 feet of water in Port Macdonald. They came up here on Easter Saturday, I think it was, and they dived down to the bottom of the cave where it's opening, the opening is, and that was about 90 feet down. And the next day we were away on the Sunday. We were up at Kalangadoo visiting some friends, and all we heard was on the TV that 2 divers had drowned in Kilsbys Hole.
It did take a toll on Mum and Dad that 2 young boys had drowned here. And I think in a way, it was a little bit of a relief for my father and mother when South Australian Weapons Research came and asked whether they could lease or close the site for a period of time to do the testing they did. That then that took away the chance of it actually probably happening again. The early 60s and into the 70s, the weapons research were here. So obviously while they were here, we didn't come near the site. But yeah, I still remember as we're growing up, venturing over here when they weren't here, and actually climbing down the back of the ladder that they used to use to access the site. So we'd climb under the platform and down the back of the ladder to access the water. There were walkways floating on the water, and also a small boat that was just normally upside down on a platform, and we used to tip it up the right way and put it in the water and float around and paddle around in the boat. So it was very much, our playground in a way, as we got older.
They had a big long cylinder about 80 feet long, and they had windows perspex, big thick perspex windows every 10 feet, and each window had a camera in it. They had this big canopy that went across the railway line that went across the cave, and a big framework that had another thing for putting the sonobuoy on it. And they had compressed air, and they'd build up this compressed air and then fire the sonobuoy into the water, and then the cameras would start operating. They would photograph the trajectory and what happened to it when it was going through the water. And then they had a big net underneath, and they had a diver that used to go down and pick up the sonobuoy, and they'd check out what was actually happening. Yes, it was interesting because, you know, normally they don't let people come into sites like that, but they had a night when they allowed us to go in, and they had the lights down into the water, and they opened up the cylinder, and we were able to climb right down to the bottom. And this diver came up to the window, and he had a red suit on, and he's quite funny. He was talking to us through the window. He's a bit like Father Christmas in a way, but he was a nice guy. Yeah, they paid me to look after the the grounds. I was able to do that. They gave me it was only about $1,100, I think, but it was virtually a government acquisition, and they kept people out for that period of time. No divers were allowed to come in. It was a secluded site for that period of time, so divers missed out for about 10 or 12 years. When they first came, she said, "Oh, we'll expect a couple of bottles of nice red," and they ended up giving us two boxes, 24 bottles of Wynn's Cabernet Syrahs, which was really nice.
Moving forward and doing the things that we are doing now, it was more about giving more people the opportunity to actually come and enjoy it and view it and see it and swim in it or snorkel or dive in it. So it sort of really has changed the sinkhole, obviously, to what it was 10 years ago. Roughly about 8 years ago that we opened it to open water divers. So if you have your open water certification, you can come and dive the site with a guide. So another dive operator will actually guide you through the site and take you for that scuba dive. We also run snorkeling tours and have been for the last couple of years, just over 2 years, and that's also guided as well. We have free divers that come here and train, and also come as just a free diving experience, so just a pleasure free dive. Free diving has become very popular, and we're getting more and more free divers that are coming here to mostly train, but also for the pleasure of just free diving in a sinkhole.
I've always been a farmer. I haven't been an entrepreneur and a businessman. And I think it's probably good for tourism, and I hope that it does work out for Graham.
We've got more than just the scuba diving and the diving. We've got accommodation and a coffee shop and tasting room and a distillery, hopefully, for our gin. So over the next 2 years, there's an awful lot happening here, which I think it will be really lovely. I think again, it will be very controlled and managed very well. That I'm still working out how best to do that, but it will be very well managed to protect the site, but it will give a number of reasons for somebody to come here and stay. It will be a little bit of a hub. You can come and taste a gin, have a coffee, stay in the accommodation, or do a snorkel tour, a dry tour, a sinkhole tour, or a dive or a free dive.